this is teacher Teacher Amaru's voice. He is a school teacher in a rural community in Cusco, Peru. So these are the narratives of social justice in education from the voices of rural teachers in Peru, my country. So I am Silvia Espinal Meza, a PhD candidate in education. So you can contact me by this email. And well, what is happening with this? Okay, so this is a brief overview of my presentation. So I will share, obviously, something about the contextualization of my study. Then I will share the research questions, so my epistemology, the main ideas of my theoretical framework. Then I would like to focus on narratives, because I know that we are working on narrative from different disciplines. So I'm working from education, from sociology, basically. So I will discuss why narratives, so why I am applying narratives in my study. Then how does narrative inquiry work? So I'm using this, as you know, this framework. And then I will show briefly my in-depth interviews guide, so that I used when I completed my fieldwork in Peru. And also I used the walking interviews, so I will explain them about that. The fieldwork, how was my fieldwork? My experience as a narrative inquirer. Then the transcription. So this is a very first, I would say, analysis of the interviews, of the in-depth interviews. And yes, the transcription and the first analysis of this narrative. So I will show to you basically the voice of Amaru, who is this school teacher from Cusco. So yeah, I will explain them across the presentation. Well, let me minimize this. Yeah. Okay, so I will share with you my contextualization. So this study is located within the framework of, international education and comparative education, but specifically, I am discussing how this, my point of departure is the neoliberal policies in Peru. So we know how these neoliberal policies are, has impacted or are still impacting different sectors in our country. So education is not the exception. How these neoliberal policies in my country have created disparities within educational sectors. So these inequalities are associated with poverty, lack of quality education, of course, gender injustice, racism, among other disparities or injustice. So when I started my PhD, so my research proposal was focused on these issues. So then I decided to choose specifically the problem that I needed, so that I would like to address. So then I noticed that the oppressive conditions, specifically in my country, so I realized that the rural sectors or the rural areas were historically abandoned by the state, historically excluded from these benefits, as most of you know. Where teachers, specifically, when I decided to focus my study on teachers, have been struggling with huge inequalities. So they, in Peru, so they're facing with these issues, and and their work, it's still, it's hidden, is not visible by the public sphere, so the official channels in Peru. So in Peru, we have a complex scenario where Lima, which is the capital city, still concentrates the majority of voices, so the voices that are really heard. But I noticed that we needed studies to, focus on these important actors, the teachers, and specifically the rural teachers, who are still working under social justice perspective. So, because when I noticed that these disparities as a result of neoliberal policies were as a result of this, very, very strong policies or neoliberal policies in education. So I noticed that, yes, I mean, at least in Peru, so we did some progress in terms of the access to education, but we didn't make a progress on, trying to close the gap between the groups who have, privilege, who are the few of in Peru, and the majority of people, including the teachers, or the rural teachers, who are obviously still living under poverty conditions. So I noticed that education, of course, is an important sector where we can, fight against injustice. But I noticed at the same time that we needed, as a Peruvian, me as a Peruvian researcher, more research about social justice in education. So, and I decided to investigate more in depth, what about these critical pedagogies from the voices of rural teachers? So, because these teachers are working as under the neoliberal policy, so they are not working apart from this framework. But at the same time, I noticed that they had and they have these different discourses. So they are trying to apply a different methodology, so a different approach to education in order to fight against this injustice. So that's, a brief summary of the contextualization, so the context in Peru. And my research has, I think it's a purpose, so to make their voices heard, so the voices of these rural teachers heard. Then, so, I mean, based on this context, so in this contextualization, I decided to focus on this main research question. So how do a group of school teachers in rural Peru conceptualize and practice their commitment to social justice through how critical pedagogies within this landscape or the constraints of neoliberal policy landscape? So yes, and specifically, I'm interested in knowing more about the practices as social justice educators and how they are applying these critical pedagogies in their practices as rural teachers. And the third secondary question is focused on in what ways this practice of social justice through how critical pedagogies. So I will say later in the presentation that I understand critical pedagogies as a practice of social justice. So I understand social justice as a framework, as an ideal set of theories. But critical pedagogies is a way, it's practice in fact. So how these critical pedagogies are being working, or how these teachers are being how these teachers are working with these pedagogies. Well, check. Well, my study is situated in Peru, so because some of you come from South America, so you know that Peru is located in South America. So I decided, as I mentioned before, that work with rural teachers, specifically in two regions of Peru, in southern Peru, in the highlands of Peru, Cusco and Ayacucho. So these areas, so these regions are classified among the poorest regions in the country. So historically excluded. Maybe, perhaps most of you know about Cusco because of Machu Picchu, which is, very well known in the world. Yes, we are, as Peruvians, we are very proud of Machu Picchu. But yes, me as an educational researcher, I am also interested in, in have this critical view of social processes, because Cusco at the same time is one of the regions, the most excluded regions in my country. And Ayacucho is also a region located in the highlands of Peru, in the south of Peru. And Ayacucho experienced an armed conflict during the 80s in the country. So yes, it's specifically, well, we as a country, we had this armed conflict during the 80s, but specifically Ayacucho was the most affected region. So as a result of this armed conflict. So I decided for these reasons to choose these specific locations, and then to find these teachers who are working with these critical pedagogies, which is part of my interest. Well, so that, this point is very important. Then, as you know, to define my approach, my methodological approach. So yes, talking about epistemology, I am working under this constructionism, interpretivism framework. So since I am interested in knowing more about their understandings of social justice, so teachers' understandings of social justice that are constructed by the actors themselves. So yes, I am, you've put in, the focus on the actors, in this case, the rural teacher, and how they are engaging with the world they are interpreting. So that is the paradigm. And these stories, I mean, just taking some quotations from the authors, are value-mediated findings where I will adopt, so this is my position, a reflexive position as the knowledge is created between me as a researcher, so was created, so it was still created, as a researcher and the rural teachers, of course. So this is a process of co-construction. So I will talk about more about that later in the presentation when I present, my first findings. Well, based on that, I position myself as a critical interpretivist researcher from a social justice approach. So I am very aware of that. So yes, I mean, because I am very engaged with this kind of topics, so I firmly believe in social justice through our education, but it's important, to say and to mention that as part of the epistemological approach. Well, following that, so I am using a theoretical framework based basically on theories of social justice from classic authors like John Rawls, Iris Marion Young, Nancy Fraser, among others, Amartya Sen, in order to have this framework of social justice from different disciplines. But specifically, I understand social justice in education from the lens of critical pedagogy. That's the reason that for me, it's very useful, it's very helpful to have these authors, maybe you know most of them. So Paulo Freire, Henry Giroux, Antonia Darder, and Peter McLaren. So they are, Freire is Brazilian, and the others are American or Canadian scholars who are working, with critical pedagogies. So, this is only a brief summary of my theoretical framework in progress, but basically I am taking powerful ideas such as assuming schools as spaces of both domination and liberation, taking concepts from Freire such as problem posing or banking education in order to liberate, in order to discuss how, from Paulo Freire understanding, so how schools can be an opportunity to, to engage with critical views and to liberate ourselves from banking education, which is, as you know, part of the neoliberal policies. And why, as following Antonia Darder, social circumstances are crucial to the formation of critical conscientiousness, which is another Freirean concept. So I am very interested in, discussing more about social context, of social, factors that are impacting over teachers' practices. And this idea of Giroux, so I will need to work a bit more about, but this idea of teachers as transformative intellectuals. So I interviewed the teachers, so I noticed that 2 or 3 of them are doing something that can be more than only do a practice of the teacher. So they are doing more, they are trying to engage with their communities. So this is part of Henry Giroux's idea. So to try to encourage teachers to be public leaders, But these ideas are coming to my mind while I am doing my PhD. I think, as I told you before, I can explain a bit more here my understanding of social justice, because as you know, in the title, I included social justice and critical pedagogy. So both are keywords in my thesis. So I understand social justice. I embrace a notion of social justice, which highlights the oppressive structures where injustice occurs and the critical role of citizens to challenge these hegemonical structures. So yes, that is my understanding following the different authors that I reviewed from my thesis. I am still in process. And social justice is, as I told you before, is a set, I understand this as a set of ideal theories with which to analyze social context or social reality And I assume critical pedagogy as a practice of social justice. So following Paulo Freire, of course, and other authors linked to Freire. So, and well, this quotation from Henry Giroux, which says, pedagogy is not a method or an a priori technique to be imposed on all students, but a political and moral practice that provides the knowledge, skills, and social relations that enable students to explore possibilities of what it means to be critical citizens while expanding and deepening their participation in the promise of a substantive democracy. So that's important. So I think from the interviews that I will share shortly, so I noticed that from the narrative of the teacher, so this element is very present. So this political, I would say, public domain, because they are working as school teachers, but they are thinking beyond the school, which is very interesting, you know, to have this dimension and this dimension connected to democracy. Well, I will talk more. We'll talk about more about that. So teachers are crucial actors to challenge social injustice. This is my assumption. So from my understanding, but where are their voices? So I mentioned before in the introduction, so in the contextualization, that I realized that their voices were silent, historically. So I grew up in Peru, and I lived there till, I mean, when I moved here just 2 years ago. And yes, I realized, I mean, from all my life until now, that their voices were silenced from different, you know, things. So I had the opportunity to work with them in rural communities, and I noticed the different ways that they have to express their voices. And yes, and I said, okay, so let's do that. Let's do this research to make their voices heard and to contribute to studies in the field of social justice and education in my country. So, well, where my motivations and why finally I decided to focus on them. So how can their stories be grasped in a profound way? So this is linked, as you know, with narratives, because I was not interested in doing like classic interviews. So obviously I value the classic interviews. So I think I found very useful. So I did work before in Peru, interviewing teachers, students, and different actors from my background in sociology. But I was, I'm interested. I was interested when I did the fieldwork to understand their points of view in this very, profound way. So that's the reason that I chose narrative approach, narrative inquiry, as you know, as my methodology. Because, just I am including, you know very well these quotes from these key authors, Catherine Griezmann, among others, this perspective to delve, that allow us to delve into human experiences where individuals use their stories to mobilize and do political work. So absolutely, yes. So yeah, was my understanding before doing the fieldwork and after the fieldwork. So as I will discuss shortly. So I think that it's a very important dimension, from their narratives. Narrative inquiry, as you know, is linked with a qualitative approach. So, and the emphasis on subjects' perspective to penetrate the meaning frames in which they operate. So, absolutely. And to investigate from a process of understanding through how questions that focus on the why and how human interactions, processes, and social change. Yes, absolutely. So I was very interested in knowing more from this perspective. Yes, narrative inquiry, as you know, allows the exploration of social, cultural, familiar, different dimensions or social dimensions within individuals constitute, express, and enact. And also, yes, that is very important, as I mentioned before, for my research, the co-creation. So when I did full work, so I exercised this, it was my first time doing this kind of studies, was challenging, but yes, I was hoping very much to do that, and I think I did. Well, and the evidence is generated in contextual settings, which are value laden. So yes, absolutely, because I had chance, the opportunity to be there. So this is a very small picture of one rural teacher and their students surrounded by the mountains in rural context. So, well, then I will explain in which ways these narratives emerged and in which ways we co-constructed. And now, which is challenging, I know, so I'm happy to receive your feedback, in what ways I am trying to, to present the narratives and to, yes, which is, we know, very challenging. So yes, we constructed these stories based on teachers' voices. Well, this is a very short quotation from Amia Lieblich, including in this Cladinin publication. So yeah, I think it's, yeah, I feel represented by this quotation because, she emphasized the idea of honor these actors. So I am trying to honor, yes, these rural teachers. And yes, we legitimize them at the end, I think, and empower them, of course. So yeah, this is, for me, I'm firmly believe in this way. So, well, I decided to focus on, following a narrative inquiry framework to develop in-depth interviews, as you know, also known as unstructured interviews as a main tool, assuming this perspective as a form of conversation. And as you know, unlike classic interviews, so the role of researcher is to be an effective listener. So from my experience doing the fieldwork, so I try to be an effective listener and see the interviewee as a storyteller, which is, it's a very important point, rather than as a respondent. So yes. So my idea when I approached to them, then I will explain briefly the way that finally I contact them. So was saying that I said before that, this is not a classic interview for 10 minutes or 15 minutes, so it will take longer than that. So if you agree, so yes, fortunately, I think I feel privileged to finally have the voices, which I would like to say a big thanks, well, because it's not an easy task. So not all people, not all of them are really, they have the willingness, to engage with this conversation, which is longer than a usual interview. Well, not only the participants have a voice, but also us as researchers, we are part of this ongoing experience. So I try to engage with them. Even I can speak the native language, so I will say shortly about their profiles. So who are them? Because most of them speak Quechua. So we speak in Spanish. So we spoke in Spanish, but obviously they introduce some words in Quechua, but immediately they translated the words. So it's important because for me, it was difficult to say, oh, sorry, I can't understand. But then to say, oh, this is, the meaning is that. So, okay, so that's good. It's part of my experience. And obviously this is part of the things that I reflected about, and I'm still reflecting. It's part of my experience. So, well, as you know, I included these questions, very open questions. So my idea obviously was not to include, specific questions. So it was to open the floor, to talk about their experiences as educators, but how they are dealing or how they are struggling with these different issues of social justice. So the lack of opportunities, or the lack of researchers. So through how the experiences of each of them. So which is, for me, was very rich to listen to them. And well, and then to try to understand in their own words what is social justice. Because I will show to you different examples that I found from these in-depth interviews, from these conversations. Well, I also apply it because this is very connected with to narrative inquiry. So working interviews. So well, a researcher working with one or more participants while conducting an interview. So I found very useful because I was there physically in Peru doing my fieldwork. So I had the chance to be there with them in their communities. So, well, as Peru is a very diverse country, so I found different cultural elements that they have and that they are part of that are part, sorry, of their understandings of social justice or their understandings of education, which I found very, very rich, you know, to understand their positions as teachers and their visions of their communities, their schools, their children. And yes, a bit about also the neoliberal policies. Well, I found very interesting. So yes, I mean, for me, the working in interviews were very useful for trying to stimulate them. So yes, I had experience to be with them, surrounded by the mountains, by the lakes, a very, very beautiful landscape in rural Peru. So yeah, this is part of the experience as well as I think as a narrative inquiry. So I applied in-depth interviews. So mainly this is a tool, and working interviews, you know, along with the in-depth interviews. So the rural teachers that I interview are 7 teachers. So, and I decided to change their real names, of course, to protect their identities as teachers, as you know, as people. So I used these pseudonyms to, and I decided to name them after these Quechua names. So you can see these are Quechua names, and Amaru, which comes from a indigenous leader in Peru during the 80s, before the independence in Peru. So this indigenous leader was called Tupac Amaru II, and Tupac Amaru. So I decided to include Amaru as a pseudonym, and then the others are Quechua names as well. So these names have specific meanings. So Ijari, Samin, Inti. Inti is the sun, so it's very well known. Urpi, which is bird, and Katari, for example. So I decided to use this pseudonym in order to honor them and in order to honor the culture that I investigate, of course. So they are primary and secondary teachers. Not all of them are working, well, so the primary teachers in Peru, they teach all the subjects, all the units, so all the subjects and disciplines throughout primary level. And well, Inti and Amaru, so they work at secondary level. And well, I had 3, 4, 5 from Cusco and 2 from Ayacucho. So, I mean, instead of deciding, because as you know, this is not a quantitative study, so this is a very, very qualitative study. So instead of focusing on the number of teachers, so I decided to focus on, because of how finally I decided to value their experiences. And for me, it was helpful to have gatekeepers, so NGOs who helped me to contact them and to find them based on their commitments or their, you know, work on social justice, critical pedagogies, intercultural education, which is important in their areas because we have Quechua and Spanish as the languages. And most of them are working under this intercultural bilingual education. So they are trying to teach, because it's not an easy process to teach in the native language and with a second language, which is Spanish. And well, these are the challenges that I'm facing with. And so, and based on that, so I decided to focus on these 7, I would say, teachers' stories. And well, that's well, I included also obviously the region and if they have Quechua as a mother tongue. So yeah, Samin, Inti, and Urpi, they don't have Quechua as a mother tongue, but they learn Quechua. They learn Quechua during their preparation as a teachers, their training as teachers. So that's very important and very, very interesting from their stories. And they are committed to teach in both languages, which is interesting. So I developed 7 in-depth interviews with this teacher. So each of them of 1 to 2 hours of duration. So I did this last year when I had the chance to go back to my country, to Peru. But following the narrative inquiry process, because you know that we are trying to understand in depth their stories, their understanding. So I am now in the process of the follow-up conversations, because yes, I started a transcription. So the process is for me, it was really, really interesting to know, oh, okay, yeah, because obviously, well, not obviously, I recorded the conversations, I recorded the interviews, obviously following an ethical guideline. Yes, and they accepted, and I am trying to involve them to, which I would like to receive your feedback if you have some ideas. I would like to try to involve them in this follow-up conversation in a different sense. So yes, I mean, to go back to some parts of their stories that I would like to have a profound understanding, but at the same time to try to encourage them to show something that they can find special and to maybe symbolize social justice or a commitment to social justice. Well, I will explain this throughout the stories, but yeah, these are my ideas in this process while I am analyzing. So trying to involve them, because yes, I am the researcher, I know that this is my position, but my idea is to generate this atmosphere of co-creation. So that's my intention. Yes, I realized that they have, for example, some of them recorded videos trying to incorporate or include this perspective or this critical perspective with their students. I think the other teacher, who is a female teacher, so she is doing very great through how an app, you know, this application to teach intercultural pedagogies through how this app, because they have technology, they have devices in the rural communities. And this is a very interesting thing to show and to explain a bit more. So yeah, that's so I mean, those are examples of things that I am thinking of for the follow-up conversations. So obviously I use a notebook to write my field notes as a narrative inquiry. So the process of this analysis, well, this is a very brief scheme on how I did the in-depth interviews. So, well, I introduced myself, introduced the research. So, and that's important to know how I approach to them. So I had the chance, as I mentioned before, to have the gatekeepers, basically NGOs that I knew before, because yes, I was involved in the past when I was living in Peru with this NGOs work. And yeah, fortunately, I have contacts, I still have contacts there. And yes, they put me in touch with some of these teachers. So yeah, the process of trying to engage with them was not, you know, an immediate thing, because yes, I decided obviously to have first conversations, you know, to try to be in touch, to meet each other. So it's not an automatic process of starting, as you know, the interview like a classic way. I think I did so with, as you know, because we are working with humans. So yeah, with some of them, I think I had a good chemistry, in the sense that we had a very fruitful conversation. In other cases, not too much, but it doesn't mean that that I didn't, you know, get their stories. Yes, of course. I mean, I had the privilege to listen to them, and yeah, that's very interesting. Well, I mean, these are ideas about what things I did, or what I did. You know, I was trying to be empathic, to be, you know, to let them to express themselves, to express their ideas, their concerns as well. And yeah, and trying to, to keep this on mind. So the co-creation. So it's not easy. So I must confess that. So it's not easy. But yes, I tried to do that with them. Then when I finished this first stage, so the in person, so in Peru physically, so I started this transcription, as I mentioned before, this first analysis following. So this is something that I am in the process of discussion as well. So for me, it would be really useful to receive your feedback. Because, yeah, I'm thinking of doing paradigmatic analysis. So, as I think most of you know, obviously, about this, to look for patterns. First, I transcribed each story. So I will explain this shortly. And then my idea is I started the process of identifying patterns, so common topics, and yes, as well as tensions and themes across individuals' story or experience. So yeah, but I am open, as you know, within this paradigm, to try to be creative, trying to be not only me, so trying to be creative with them, with each of them, to create something that I can, the way that I can honor them, so I can, or maybe I can contribute to honor them or to make their voices heard. So that's important. So that is the process of analysis that I am doing now. So yeah, I finished that transcription, including the full voices of them, my fieldwork notes. So yes, I had a journal. So I had a chance to write when I was doing my fieldwork there in rural Peru. So I always had my notebook, because I like handwriting. So I prefer, instead of recording with my cell phone, so I prefer to write by myself, which is, for me, is useful to have my own, it's my own talk. So after the conversation or after a visit to the school, so okay, these are my talks, so these are my doubts. So yes, I couldn't find this one very interesting, or this thing that this teacher mentioned was absolutely important, so I didn't notice, or something like that. Then I decided to write a personal summary. So yes, I did. I am starting. So I did with the first teacher's story, and including the most relevant biographical accounts of each teacher. Because yeah, it's very helpful. And then yeah, I'm just in this process. The blue and this one, the second is, yeah, I think the orange and the blue, I am just in this moment, more or less. And then I'm trying to define the content categories. So as I told you before, they're doing the paradigmatic analysis, so trying to identify the patterns and the most the elements that can resonate. And then, of course, yes, as I am trying to include here. So yes, my idea is to invite them. So I am in the process of, as I mentioned, the follow-up conversations to invite them to co-write. When I asked them, when I was there physically, all of them, so for me it was, that's very good to hear. So all of them expressed their agreement on that. So I asked them, so how do you feel? How do you feel if I would like to invite you to co-write? And say, yeah, Silvia, that's very good. So yeah, so count me in. So that's very good to hear, because that means that maybe they find, well, my presence there, a bit helpful to try to reflect collectively. So that's my idea. So, but I'm happy to receive your feedback and, insights if you can. Well, yes, I mean, I'm not sure if, yeah. So this is as you know, I am in the process of analysis. So I will share with you this first story from teacher Amaru. So I decided to write first to talk about the context where this teacher is working. and how finally I met this teacher. So how approached to him in this case, and well, how these different elements. So I included the chacana, which is the Inca's cross, very famous Inca's cross, and has lots of meaning included in that. Because this teacher, which was my first in-depth interview, and probably was one of the teachers that definitely made me feel, wow, that I thought before that, oh yes, I know Cusco, I know, not I know, but yes, I have experience working here. But when I met him, so I was very impressed. I was very impressed by not only by their knowledge, by his knowledge, sorry, but also because of their engagement with the community. So the engagement with these, elements, with these cultural elements from the Incas. And I decided, yes, to write something about the Inca cross, the chacana, which is called the chacana, and how finally I met him. And then as part of the narrative, so I am trying, which is the way that I'm doing, so I have to receive feedback. I'm trying, to include how, well, I mean, he was born, Teacher Maru was born in Cusco that year. So how he involved, or he studied arts at a School of Fine Arts in Cusco, Bellas Artes in Cusco. And finally, including how he experienced that as a student in fine arts at that moment in Cusco. So for me, it was important to reflect about the time that he was studying there, because as I mentioned before, my country experienced that an armed conflict. So the armed conflict affected most of the area. So Ayacucho, not Cusco, not too much, but Cusco as well was affected by the armed conflict. And yes, and from this quotation, as you can see, sorry. So he said something that this experience in a difficult time there, so during the armed conflict, was also challenging for them. He, as a young student, he said something like they were easily, captured, or they were captured, not of them, but they find obviously easy to catch for them under talk. So he's talking about the rebel groups, so the subversive groups like the Shining Path or Sendero Luminoso, who were in war against the state. So that's very important for me to reflect about the time that he was studying arts, and the talks, the subversive groups were at university. So that's very important to mention, because the subversive groups, especially the Shining Path was born, yes, because the leader of the Shining Path, Abimael Guzman, so he was a university professor. So they started, having the university as a space for the revolution, or the attempt to do the revolution in Peru. Well, that's important for me to try to reflect something about that. Well, I'm just including some extracts, some paragraphs of this story that I am trying to write. And yeah, this part for me was really, really, how can I say? Yes, I feel inspired by this dialogue that I would like to present to you, because when I asked him about the way that he promotes reflection on the Inca past and with the students, because he talked a lot about the Incas legacy. He talked a lot about his own experiences as young student, as someone who was born in the Andes, and someone who was born, it's not an accident, because just briefly to say that he was born in Tinta, Cusco, and Tinta, Cusco is the same place where Tupac Amaru II, this indigenous leader from the 18th century, sorry. And he was born in the same town that Tupac Amaru. And that's the reason that I decided to name after Tupac Amaru. So he was born in Tinta, Cusco. For me, for Peruvians, when I studied history, studied history in school, so Tinta has a very powerful meaning, you know, to be the place of the rebels, so people who are, you know, fighting against in this case, so Tupac Amaru, you know, had this rebellion against Spaniards, against, you know, colonization. So that's very important for me. And then I decided to ask Amaru at, you know, when we were talking. So, and immediately, so this is the dialogue. So it's very short, but it's very powerful, I think. So we were physically in the school. Specifically, we were during the break where students are out of the room. So, and they were, you know, playing. So just outdoors. And when I asked teacher Maru, so how are you doing this? And he replied saying something, though, okay, let's see. And immediately, I mean, a group of 3 or 4 students came with us. And he said something, I mean, I included this as a dialogue. So let's see, what are your surnames? I mean, the students replied, Mamani, Romuaja, Nyaupa, which are the surnames. And then teacher Maru says, you know, looking that. Now I tell them, why don't they put 2 surnames together and come up with a name? For example, Mamani is Aymara. It's not Quechua. Mamani means eagle. So, I mean, immediately he explained the meaning. In the case of Romuaja, it is linked to nobility. They are tied to Incas, to their nobility. Nyaupa, which is the other surname, are the most visionary. The Nyaupa is the one who goes ahead, the one who knows the way. We always need a Nyaupa as a guide, which is very interesting. We as teachers are also Nyaupa. Yes, they are leaders or they are guiding. So I give each one a mission. So, I mean, Amaru said, the teacher, based on their surnames and meanings, and they work together. So this is the way that I'm doing. So it's how to bring that cosmovision to put each one in their spirit. So he refers, again and again about the spirit and this spiritual dimension. And he said something like, it's not monetary value, it's a spiritual value, it's emotion. So yes, I mean, when I was there, so I was really impressed in the way that, yes, and then I included a bit of my reflections and realized how a teacher can practice social justice with students to empower them, because these surnames are Quechuas and Aymara surnames. And historically, these surnames are discriminated by the Spanish surnames. So, which is interesting because they are, he is trying to empower them by, by showing them how their surnames are, part of the discussion. So how their surnames can be, they can feel proud of their surnames instead of having a Spanish surname. Because yes, if you have a Spanish or even a European surname, so you can feel in Peru, so you are saying, oh yes, I have an European surname, or Spanish or French or German, whatever. But yeah, for me, it's, oh yeah, this is brilliant. This is brilliant to understand how he is working with them. And yeah, I included just a bit part of my reflections. And then, we reflected also about the teaching profession. So how he's viewing teaching not only as a job, as I do notice from this quotation. So he assumes that teaching is a job that, yes, that he loves. And then it is very important because from this quotation, when he mentioned how education has a purpose, so they are critiquing some of these issues of, some of these characteristics of educational system. So he's saying something that well, we don't want someone to sew her, they get to primary school, it's also a filler course. So he's critiquing how arts, because he's working and he's teaching arts and education. So he's critiquing, you know, the historically, how historically the state, the Peruvian state, has not put a lot of attention to these subjects, because they consider that arts are not functional to neoliberal system. So that's which is a shame, of course. And yeah, I mean, based on that, so he mentioned something that obviously the subjects on mathematics communication are the, you know, the subjects that are valued, you know, as instrumental, I will say, subjects to neoliberal policies. So yes, I included also, you know, my reflections, so that I would like to discuss in the follow conversations with them, with him specifically in this case. And yes, I mean, I mentioned that banking education, it's linked to Freudian concept, this Freudian concept, which minimize or annul students' creative power to stimulate the interest or to encourage them to be critical, etc. And, you know, and being in a position of being oppressed, right? So I mean, I think that he is thinking from a social justice perspective, looking at these social problems beyond this rigid content, offered by courses or, you know, at primary and secondary levels in Peruvian schools. So just for me, as well as, he is critiquing, so he's saying something very powerful about the banking education and, you know, these neoliberal policies. So yes, this quote, for example, it's another quote about that. Oh, this is very powerful, because he did a reflection about colonialism when I decided to ask, I mean, directly, what is social justice? Because yeah, we were talking about social justice, but I mean, one moment I decided to say, oh, but yeah, what is social justice? I mean, and he started by saying something like, of course, to get into social justice, I can imagine the social justice of 1535, which is the year where the Spaniards came to South America and started the colonialism. So that's, I mean, that's very powerful, because yeah, he was thinking of, okay, so look at these processes. So we need to go back to that moment of our history. And well, he explained about this, the way that the colonization operates in South America, which was very close to, for example, the colonization in other parts of the world, Africa, and how this, you know, how the evangelization, or how the religion had an important role to colonize indigenous populations. So if you were not a Christian, obviously you need to be baptized. If not, you are an heretic and you will die. So that's basically how these things operate at that moment. So, and yeah, he said, as you know, that he thinks that we should talking about what kind of social justice we talking about, and if formally we are a post-colonial society, a post-colonial country, but still we are, you know, we have this colonial legacy in a very strong way. So because then we had this regime of latifundio, or land owners, you know, and most of these indigenous population colonized by the Spaniards, then were dominated by this land owner as part of this latifundio regime in Peru. So yes, that's for me, I mean, for me, it was really powerful to hear about his reflections about how you then, I mean, he as a rural teacher, he is a rural man. So he was thinking about how the other people that are living there, so the other, you know, you can see here, and the man who has started to do his little business, because he was thinking of how these oppressive conditions, sorry, are still present, you know, nowadays. So because, you know, some of the authorities or some of these entrepreneurs or businessmen from the rural areas. So they are dominating others. So which is very powerful, because yeah, when I realized that, I say, oh yes, of course. And teacher Amaru is reflecting about how these oppressive conditions are still present, and how Freire is very powerful to understand this, because as Freire says, so Freire's ideas about oppressor and oppressed, where at a certain moment of their existing experiences, I mean, I'm just reading this quotation, the oppressed adopt an attitude of adhesion to the oppressor and find a model of manhood. So yeah, I found this quotation powerful to explain why teacher Amaru's, well, I will check with Amaru in a follow-up conversation, if he thinks that, I'm not sure if I am right, saying something from Freire that, yeah, at the moment, so we can have this attitude of adhesion, so to be part of the oppression, so to follow the oppressor and to be an oppressor, and to find this model of manhood, because he discusses a lot about this. And yeah, and it's why. So yeah, to finish, well, this is a very early, very early scheme of these themes or topics that emerged or are emerging from this first analysis of this narrative. So for this presentation, that I am included this first narrative, or part of the first narrative from teacher Amaru. Yeah, I mean, from taking these critical approaches, this critical interculturality, because teacher Amaru, not teacher Amaru, the other teachers are working under intercultural bilingual education. So they are teaching in both languages, and how these local knowledges, so how this, Quechua and the cultural values associated with Quechua and the culture of the Incas are, being reappraising. So they are trying to reappraise this in order to empower their students, in order to, to do more than the Ministry of Education is saying. So to go beyond this, very classic, I would say, way of teaching, imparting subjects in a very classic way. So they are trying to create dialogues, or they're trying to rise, or they're trying to provoke their students to develop the critical conscientiousness. So yeah, in different ways. So promoting changes within their communities. And yes, I mean, they are critiquing. So teacher Amaru is critiquing the neoliberal model, the banking education, but still, so I couldn't include this as part of this presentation, but he said at the end that he's not trying to say that the native language is superior, or he's trying to have the Western model and the native knowledge at the same level. So because the idea is to work with both epistemologies, with both frameworks. So for me, it's very powerful, because okay, they have a critical view, but at the same time, so they are very aware of our current times. So, and they think, which is interesting, that the students need to learn in both cultures. Well, sorry if I take longer than I expected. So thank you very much for your attention. And well, I'm happy to just. Okay.
Thank you. That is really, really interesting, I think. Silvia, thanks so much. There's already a question from Yuntong Lee.
Yuntong. Mm-hmm.
Do you want to summarize it, Yuntong? Do you want to come on?
Hi, I'm Yuntong. Sorry, my camera is broken and I can only speak by microphone. So it's very impressive and I really love it. Just some questions about the theoretical framework. So I heard that you mentioned Nancy Fraser's theory. So what part of her theory gave some implications to your research? sorry, I got a flu and sorry for my voice. As well as the oppressive structures. It's very interesting. So does the oppressive structures show when you interview your participants? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Juntan, for the questions. Yes, I mean, yes, I mentioned that I used Nancy Freire as part of my theoretical framework. So specifically, so I am taking her ideas about recognition. So the struggle, as you know, the struggle for recognition, because as you know, as I mentioned, so these are teachers that historically were excluded. So my idea is to empower them, so to show them. And yeah, I found very useful. I found the work of Nancy Fraser very useful to to address these issues. And because, as you know, she mentions this participatory justice as well, where the voices of the groups are part of this, decision-making processes. So yeah, I found very useful to illuminate my research. And sorry, I missed the last part of your question. So
because you mentioned the oppressive structures. Yeah, and I think it's very interesting. So does it show? I mean, the oppressive structures when you talk to your participants, does they give you some responses of something like oppressive, how the oppression reflect, and something like that?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, the teacher Amaru, the first interview, the first story that I show, yes, I mean, he did, and he mentioned banking education, so capitalism as part of this framework, which are exercising oppression. So because, yeah, he was very, very clear by, mentioning these things, that he didn't mention specifically the word oppressive or oppressive structures, but from his narrative, for me, it's very clear that he has critiques, so that he is trying to say that what kind of social justice, for example, if we are still, for example, I remember this quotation from him. He said something like, I mean, what kind of social justice we are talking about if we're still, just focusing on these assessments, so these educational assessments, in order to access higher education, for example, if you are at secondary level. So why kind of social justice if you are focused as a teacher, so you are only focusing on mathematics and language, for example, so as specific competences or skills that you need to develop, but you are not reflecting about, the role of school, the role of teachers, in addressing social injustices. So that's a good way to say that, yes. And from the other stories, it's very important to say that the other stories, at least the 3 other stories from the teachers that I remember now, yes, they didn't have a specific mention of oppressive structures. I found that the 3 of them were very worried about the specific context of their communities, which is interesting. When I asked about, oh, but what about the Ministry of Education role? What about, they say, well, we are trying to follow the, the policies. So yeah, doing the curricula. Yeah, but we are trying to do more than. But yes, I couldn't find, which is a very interesting question. I couldn't find, but yes, I mean, yeah, exactly. But still, I mean, I found a very powerful narratives, from the reviews of intercultural education in Quechua, for example. And yeah, so yeah, I would need to to analyze. So yes, and to co-create. Yeah, but thank you for thank you.
Thanks so much. I wondered if
can I follow up, because it may
Yeah, Maria, yeah, and then also Pablo later, I think. So Maria.
Pablo, yes, I'm just reading. Or Pablo, can
So, sorry to, but it just connects to the question, because one of the things I was really surprised about the fact that there were only 2 women, because here you would find probably there are more men as primary teachers than women in terms of participants. I was really surprised at, with the gender kind of distribution.
Yeah, exactly.
And I was wondering whether actually that is a kind of demonstration of oppression in practice, but the fact that maybe men feel more able to engage in those kind of the practice of critical pedagogy much more than women. Maybe I don't know, maybe there are more men teachers than women teachers in but it was just I wondered about that.
Yeah, thanks, Maria, for your question. Absolutely. So from a general overview, well, according to the national statistics in Peru, so we have more female teachers at primary level. So at secondary level, I mean, there are closely to half, so 55 or 56% male teachers versus like 40 something compared to female teachers. So yeah, I mean, it's a very good reflection. I noticed that. So I couldn't reflect very much, but it's a very important point to reflect if maybe men are more able to reflect and to say these things and to feel more more comfortable, or to have the confidence to do that. When I spoke to the 2 female teachers that I interviewed, I noticed that at least one of them, she was very nervous at the beginning, saying things, or this is connected to empowerment, because saying things, oh, sorry, Silvia, so I don't think that you find useful my perspective, so just I am doing this with my students. So saying that, I was like, no, I would like to know, because I will try, to feel that that we as women, so we have more ideas to share. We have powerful ideas. And yes, during the conversation, I mean, she was very nervous and she, well, I'm not sure. So yeah, that is a very important point to reflect as well from their narratives. So yeah, I was trying to find more women, and then when the NGOs provided me with the content, say, well, but I need more women, because I have men teachers, which is fine, which is good. But what about, as you said, where are the women? Yeah, thanks for that question. Okay. From Pablo,
Pablo, do you want to come on? Yeah, Pablo's going to recap.
Hi, Silvia.
Hey, hello, Pablo.
Hi, thanks for your presentation. I have like 2 questions. First of all, thanks for your presentation. I'm doing something really similar, but with former student activists, and I'm asking like a really similar questions. What are they doing right now in Chile, in relation with social justice? My first question, in a certain kind, relates with that, with my own experience as a fieldwork. That is, when teachers said that they are doing social justice practices, what is the role of students in those social justice practices? Did you see students as active participants in knowledge, in making decisions, or basically in a certain way their social justice practices reproduce this hierarchical logic of classrooms? And the second question, that is more from a narrative studies approach, it's something that Molly Andrews and Corinne have stated in some papers and books. What is the relation that you make between the stories that they tell you and the stories circulating in Peru right now? Like, for instance, what kind of stories about social justice are circulating right now in Peru, or about rural teaching? For instance, I think that Pedro Castillo was a rural teacher, yeah?
Yes.
And so what are the circulating narratives that in a certain way may relate to the answers that they give you or the stories that they tell you.
Yeah.
Or for instance, you mentioned that the NGOs were you gatekeeper.
Yes, the gatekeepers were being used.
To what extent the selection of particular NGO led you to particular narratives about social justice?
Yes, absolutely.
What kind of characteristics have those NGOs?
Yeah.
Those
Thanks.
are my views.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, Pablo. Yes, very, very interesting question. So the first one, yes. Yes, it's important to clarify that I did in-depth interviews with the teachers. So yes, I know that it's very important to observe. So I didn't observe classrooms. So I decided to get these stories, to create these stories with the teachers, but by taking or getting their own views of social justice. But however, I had the chance with at least three of 7 teachers. I had the chance to be with their, as part of their, not the lectures or the classes, but as part of their spaces or community spaces with their children. So yes, I had the chance to see how they interacted, how these teachers interacted with the students. So for me, I noticed that they were trying, to do the teaching in a different way. So yes, trying not to reproducing, hierarchies, not to reproducing these vertical relationships. Well, because I think that obviously this is mediated, so there is a bias because I was there. But across the conversations that we had, so I noticed, yeah, if someone is trying to, like Teacher Amaru or Teacher Katari, or another one who who were very committed to this approach. But at the same time, so they were very aware of that they can fail, because Teacher Amaru was very clear about, so we are failing. So he includes himself as part of a community. We are failing. We are trying to do something, but we are failing at the end. So at the end, so we are teaching, just focusing on mathematics and language, for example, to get access or to access higher education or universities, or very neoliberal. So yeah, but it's important to mention that, because I need to be very clear when I write my dissertation, to explain these things. And the other part of your question is also interesting. So what about the stories that they told me, and what about, yes, absolutely, these stories about social justice that are circulating in Peru? Yes, as you mentioned, so we had Pedro Castillo, who was a rural teacher as president of Peru. He's a former president of Peru. And this is very, very, very powerful, because wow, so I did this fieldwork before the protests begin in my country. So the protests against the new government. So the protests that are, as Chile and different countries in South America. So they are protesting against this historically, exclusion. And my work in progress is, from my view, at least at this moment, it's an attempt to be against, or it's not aligned with this narrative from an official narrative. Is saying that social justice doesn't matter, so we need to focus on education, just as a because it's not quite similar to the Chilean case, but yes, it's still, the privatization is very powerful. So they are insisting, as the official narrative is insisting in this way. That's part of the reasons that finally Pedro Castillo was removed. Anyway, so this is a very complex scenario, and he was attacked by certain groups, specifically from right-wing parties in Peru, because not only, but because of his origins as rural teacher. So yes, my narratives are kind of counter-hegemonic narrative in a way. So yes, I think so. And yes, but I will need to provide more explanation about that. But it's a very, very, very powerful point. And the NGOs, yes, and I would like to say something briefly about the NGOs as gatekeepers. So yes, I noticed that when I contacted the NGOs, so the two NGOs that I contacted, so both NGOs were working with intercultural pedagogies, but not specifically, yes, linked to critical pedagogies, but they don't have, how can I say, a real, so they have a commitment, so they are working with these teachers, trying to learn with them, from this perspective, or this critical perspective. But I noticed that these NGOs are still under, which is part of our reality, so they are working with this mandates or global policies or national policies in education, which is interesting, which is important. But yeah, when I decided to contact them, so I was very aware of this. Yeah, those are the things that, yes, I need to include as part of my reflection. So how my study finally is shaping, taking into account these elements. Yes, yeah, that's very good. Thank you for that.
Silvia, there are two people who have left who have got some very nice comments here, but I'm wondering if there's anybody who is actually here still who would like to ask a question, because we can go back to those ones also, but is there anybody?
I have some ideas I wrote down while listening to the presentation. Thank you, Silvia. And the comments, very nice comments, very fruitful for thought, so to speak. I was wondering when you said, while providing the participants with relevant pseudonyms, culturally relevant pseudonyms, this is an honoring process. And I was wondering if they were aware of these honoring and if they accepted this honoring. That's one way of looking at the collaboration and co-narrating with them. Then you mentioned your voice as a narrative inquirer that you captured, which I really value also in such research, and the personal summary that followed. So I was wondering about the relationship of these initial and immediate reflections in relation to these narratives. How do they relate with the next steps of your analysis and interpretation? And what is their role, if already maybe it is in the way you did interpretation or not? So I'm just curious how you found this relationship, how you put it at work, and how this can be disentangled in your writing, in the final dissertation. I'm curious. And I loved when you mentioned that teacher Amaru said it's about giving a mission, and it's about having its spiritual value, something about the names. I really loved that you captured that and that he said that. And for me, who I am also a narrative therapist, I'm a practitioner and a teacher, an academic. As a narrative practitioner, I'm looking at this identity descriptions that he's providing and that you are capturing, and you use the word empower. I'm curious if he used the word empower, or if you are using the word empower in a Freirean perspective from the framework that you are operating with, this kind of data. And finally, I would say that when teacher Amaro says we are failing in the end, we are failing, I also implicitly hear that we are failing but resisting, because he just showed you in how he works with children, the resistance of finding the meanings behind the names, for example, and also using your quest, your inquiry as a platform for these rather implicit or invisible resistances that he's operating in the micro level, in the area of the relationship with his children, not in terms of politics. Okay. So I did other things, the resonances, and thank you very much. Very, very insightful research.
Thank you, VDU. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, so yeah, I'm very happy to receive this feedback, which is absolutely helpful. Yeah, About the pseudonyms, yes, that I use. So yes, I decided in the first, when I did the interviews last year, so yes, to use these pseudonyms to protect their identities, and they accepted in the first instance, so they accepted, but I would like to go back to them if they are still comfortable, using these surnames. But yes, I must say that, which is for me was surprised. I mean, I was very surprised by this because the majority of them, I think 5 of 7, they expressed their desire to appear. I mean, just to say, no, but you don't need to use pseudonyms. So you can use my name and say, yeah, but this is a way to protect your identity. So this is part, well, then I asked my supervisor and she advised me to, and she said something else, Silvia, please use unprotected names and ask them if they, they would like to accept these surnames. And I explained it why. So they know more than me what are the meanings and what are, So yes, but I would like to go back in the follow-up conversations that will be happening this month if they are still accepting, or if they feel that, no, I need, I'm not feel comfortable with these names. Well, about the personal summary, yes. My personal summary, yes, the intention is to serve, so just for me as a narrative inquirer, to put my thoughts, so because I included my own thoughts, my own reflections, my own questions, the different things that emerged from the fieldwork, during the fieldwork and after the fieldwork, which is, for me, it's very helpful. And how is this connected to the interpretation? Well, it's deeply connected, because based on that, so based on their stories or their narratives or their voices, I'm trying to connect with my own reflection. So I produce this first analysis, which is a first draft, which I would like, obviously, to have them to try to, to connect ideas, because I'm not sure. This is, I would like to go further with your last question about if they are failing, and as you said, they are resisting. So they are saying, yes, they're failing, but above all, they are resistant. So yes, this is one of the things that I would like to, for example, with teacher Maru. So I would like to go back to him to reflect more about what, I mean, what are you referring to failing? So you feel comfortable. But now I think, as Pablo was reminded us, now Peru is facing a very difficult political situation. So I know that it will have an effect on the teacher. So I am very aware of this. So I will be very transparent in including these issues, which are part of the political environment, so the political context. And I'm sure that, yes, that most of them are in favor of the protests, maybe, but I would like to ask before if they feel comfortable to speak during this month, or they prefer maybe a bit later, because I know that, yes, it's extremely difficult situation now in Peru. But yes, and the spiritual dimension, well, yes, I would, for me, as someone who is trying to know more about this dimension, who is absolutely, I think, was a gift. So I consider that in that sense, because yes, he connects very, he connected, I mean, teacher Maru connected this idea of, for example, the meanings associated with the mountains. So if he said something like, the mountains are alive. So we are here surrounded by the mountains. So the water is here. So we cannot treat the water or the mountains as just elements of the landscape. So we have Inca's legacy. So we know that the Incas, and the different civilizations before Spaniards came to Peru, so they were based on agricultural. So when they did Machu Picchu, for example, which is a famous Inca city, so yes, was based on this agricultural cycle, which is connected also to the mountains, to the sun, to the lake, the water. So yes, and yeah, as Peruvian, as someone who, yes, I was born in Peru as Peruvian. Yes, I feel very close to that. Even I was born in the urban area, in the capital city, Lima. My parents come from rural areas. My mother speaks Quechua. So from my own background, so I feel very close to them. So this is part of, I think I forgot to mention that. But I mentioned in the thesis, I'm mentioning the thesis, so my rural roots. So what that part of my motivations to do this. So my own rural, and my mother and grandmother, I mean, yeah, she both speak Quechua, which is interesting. Yeah, yes. Well, thank you, Ovidiu, for your reflections. Very powerful. Thank you. So
Is anybody waiting?
Lorraine
is not with us.
is not here yet. Well done. I just finished a life story interviewing 15 Black teachers. Oh, cool. Do you ask?
Can I just ask?
Yeah.
I was wondering about the pseudonyms, and normally what I do, I ask people to choose their pseudonyms or ask them if they want to choose them. But also I kind of blend narrative with participatory action research, and normally you would do a lot more, in terms of planning together, co-research from the beginning, and you would also allow people to remain, their identity to remain if that's what they wish. And I find that, in a way, maybe you need to talk about the context of the university and ethics procedures, kind of limiting, the ability of kind of going, honoring them to the extent that they want to be honored, or giving them the platform that they want fully. But also one of the things I was thinking about when Amaru was speaking about his being in university and the context of, and you talked about Sendero Luminoso and the fact that it was the lead was a university teacher, lecturer. I was really thinking about whether he's kind of communicating with you in a way that this kind of critical pedagogy really, and liberation, and he's talking about his own decolonization, like going into that himself, kind of getting that out of the colonial system, whether actually that would be the ultimate demonstration of that, in a way, that kind of path. And in fact, Paulo Freire himself was had to flee Brazil. He was in prison, and he had to live in, outside for many years before he could return. So, I wondered to what extent you can actually engage in critical pedagogy without being attacked, one, by the system, and actually going back to the question that Pablo put earlier about hierarchy. One of the things that happens, or my experience is, and also Bell Hooks writes about this.
Yeah, I know.
One of the things that happens is you get attacked by students. I think that the fact that you are sitting in a place like a university where banking education is the model kind of presents them with is a very jarring kind of experience, and to be engaged in critical pedagogy praxis in their university context, and they kind of throw that back at you for giving them the space that they maybe want but are afraid to hold. I don't know, just rambling, sorry, but I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, thank you, Maria.
Yeah, thank you, Maria. Yes, very powerful reflections. Yeah.
Silvia, do you want to say anything to kind of wrap up? Because I'm conscious we're keeping people a little bit beyond time now. So I don't know, do you have any final points you want to return to from the chat, or just from what we've been talking about?
The ways what honoring witness may contribute to social change. I wish you well. Okay, what actions? So, yeah. I'm gonna follow construction will look like. Yeah, I think I would like to comment, yeah, briefly about the ways that, yes, the ways that I am thinking of going back to them, as part of this follow-up conversation. So I would like to go back to them to, yes, obviously to continue our conversations about different topics that emerged. So the things that are happening in my country, so how they are feeling, because I did the field work last year from June in 2022 to September, more or less. So at that moment, so then when I go back to them, so I would like to hear their voices. So, and specifically, in this idea to empower them, so to honor them. So yeah, I was thinking of asking them, but this is up to them. So freely show if they want to show something that they consider valuable. So I had the chance to see some video, for example, video researches that teacher Amaru, for example, this first one teacher that I interviewed. So he has produced some short videos talking about the different cultural elements from the Incas in Cusco. So, I mean, he showed it to me, some of these researches when I was there. And I consider, so when I asked him, so, I mean, what do you feel? You would like to share with me? So yes, for sure. So I'm just working with my students, throughout these pedagogical researches. But I would like not only, to say, oh, he's doing this, or he's doing this material, trying to inform, trying, to let their students know about the cultural values, the Inca past, but also trying to get the meanings that they can associate with these pedagogical researches, which I consider valuable. So the ideas, in critical pedagogies, at least we know that it's very challenging framework, but yeah, it's, to try to listen to their meanings, the ways that they allocate to these different ways of doing critical pedagogies. Because yeah, it's good to hear that they are promoting discussion, for example, but in which ways? So I'm very happy. So I am still, yeah, very excited to know in which ways, and from Maria's reflection. So being aware of the neoliberal policies of banking education, the dominant approach. So yeah, most of the students, so that's a very, for me, this is a very, I have this question. I'm not sure if all the students are really happy with them, because when I asked about that to them, say, so yeah, the children are responding very well, so they are feeling comfortable with me, with the way that I am doing teaching, so the way that I am working with them. So we are enjoying the sessions. We are enjoying this, not only the sessions specifically, as part of a classroom, but outdoors, for example. Yeah, but still it's yes, it's a dispute. It's a context of dispute where these teachers are working. So yeah, but my idea is to continue this engagement through how this way of presenting the story. So I would like to present each story. This is my objective. So I will see how it goes. Not to present the narration in this. So I feel comfortable writing this, including their voices, but I would like to maybe to do something creative following each of them. So because that is one of the things that I was talking to my supervisor a month ago. So trying, to gather ideas if they feel comfortable, or if they prefer to include something, for example, a song, which is a pedagogical method that most teachers are using throughout songs, for example, in Quechua language. So if they want to include just a piece of this, the lyric or something like this. So yeah, but I would like to finish. I would like to give the freedom to them to take the initiative. So I don't like to put pressure, because yes, I'm very curious, but well, it's some reflections.
I think, maybe it would be nice, Silvia, if you could come back and do another seminar when you've put all this together. This would be really lovely. And this is one of the nice things about these seminars. If anybody listening would like to give a seminar like this, we're actually booked up this year, but in the future years, just please let me know. But so Silvia is at this point, which is a great point to hear about your work. It's just been wonderful to hear about it. And you can see people are all really interested to see where it's going. So please come back when you know where it's going a bit more. It will be really nice.
Yeah. Thank you, Corinne. So yes, I'm definitely, I would like to. Yes.
Yeah, great. Yeah. I mean, I think we should probably finish, because you've been going for a long time, so you must be tired, Silvia. Thank you so much for a really inspiring presentation and for all these really engaging.
Thank you to everyone who attended. So thank you very much. So I really. Gracias, muchas gracias, Maria.
Want to go to any of the others? I'm going to send on the Eventbrite the email where you can subscribe to an e-list, and then we'll send you notifications of other events like this. But thank you so much for being here. Just thanks so much, Silvia. It's been great.
Yeah, thank you, Corinne. So thank you, everyone. So see you very soon, I hope. Bye.